Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in.
The galaxy had grown quiet, peaceful, maybe too peaceful. For over 100 years, no one had heard a whisper from the human worlds. No signals, no ships, no survivors. The archives called them extinct. Another species lost to time, burned out by war, wiped clean by disease. Most thought it was for the best. The humans had always been a problem, loud, stubborn, dangerous. Always building weapons, always fighting someone, so when they vanished, the galaxy breathed easier. Their planets were divided up, their ruins picked clean, their stories turned into bedtime tales told to scare children. But on the icy world of Trivar 9, something began to stir. It started with a tremble, not an earthquake, not weather, something deeper, like the planet itself was holding its breath. The miners said it felt like a heartbeat under the stone. Then came the hum, low, heavy, mechanical, something old waking up. The diggers backed away, spooked. Their scanners started to fail. Lights flickered, machines stopped working, and then, rising out of the frozen ground like a nightmare in slow motion, a shape appeared. Black. Sharp. Covered in markings no one could read. It didn't match any known technology. Too clean. Too quiet. The Empire's command base picked up the signal, just noise at first. But then came the voice. Just 3 words. We are awake. And every system on the planet went dark. In the capital chambers of the Zitharan Empire, the High Council froze mid-meeting. Old files were pulled from locked databases. Names no one had spoken in decades began flashing across screens. Somewhere deep in the archives, a red warning lit up for the first time in a century. Human signal detected. The message wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't a broadcast of peace. It was a statement, sharp, final, and unmistakably human. We are awake. In the control chamber of Zitharan High Command, silence clung to every surface like frost. Holoscreens blinked nervously. Security officers shifted in their boots. The supreme strategist, Lord Kevar, narrowed his 3 eyes at the pulsing signal being projected above the table. This can't be real, he muttered, his voice low and steady, like a man hoping the lie would become truth if he said it calmly enough. Beside him, the Minister of External Threats, Mara Vel, leaned forward, her fins twitching with unease. The signal is human. The pattern, the structure, even the distortion. It's Earth military protocol. Another counselor scoffed. Earth military protocol hasn't existed in over a century. They're gone. History, shadows. But the screen said otherwise. The signal was spreading. First Trivar 9, then jump space buoys in nearby sectors began echoing the same tone, subtle, steady, and growing louder with each bounce. It was like someone had thrown a stone into a still lake and the ripples were now reaching every shore. This is a bluff, someone said. A trick. Maybe pirates. A rebellion. Something old that's broken. Kevar shook his head. That's not a trick. That's a warning. He stared at the words glowing on the screen again, trying to feel nothing. But deep inside, buried under years of cold training and political detachment, something stirred, something ancient. Fear. They had all heard the stories. Humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't stop when they lost, didn't retreat when outnumbered. They didn't follow rules or battle etiquette. They fought with rage, with memory, with something wild behind their eyes, like pain had made them sharper instead of weaker. The empires had been glad when Earth fell. They'd watched it happen, maybe even helped it along. A virus, they said, a planet-wide plague that tore through their systems too fast to stop. And instead of asking for help, the humans locked their borders and went silent. The rest of the galaxy assumed they were gone, dead, erased. But now, this The stakes were suddenly unbearable. If the humans were truly back, if that signal was real, then everything had changed. It wasn't just one planet anymore. It wasn't just Earth. Over the centuries, humans had scattered far across the stars. Colonies, outposts, secret bunkers, lost fleets, so many forgotten corners of space might still hold pieces of them. And if one piece had awakened, others might too. Which meant the empires weren't looking at a single disturbance. They were looking at a spark, and sparks, when left unchecked, became fire. High above Trivar 9, inside a slow-moving observation drone, the Zithran military AI known as Glaive ran a new simulation. It projected a resurgent scenario based on archived human tactics. The numbers weren't promising. If even 0.4% of the Terran military stockpiles had survived, if even a handful of cryo soldiers were hidden across border worlds, if even one Titan-class warship remained functional. The Galactic Balance Index dropped by 48%. Collapse within 3 years. Counselor Mara read the numbers and her voice dropped to a whisper. One ship, one message, and we're already planning for evacuation routes. But she wasn't wrong. Back on Trivar 9, the structure that had risen from the ice was changing. Shifting. The outer walls unfolded like armor plates on a war beast, revealing sleek weapon arrays and tower-mounted sensor systems. Energy pulses ran down its spine in organized patterns, alive, aware. Around it, Empire troops had already formed a perimeter. Drones circled the air. Ground units readied their rifles, but none dared step closer. Because they knew. That thing wasn't theirs. That thing was human. Worse, it was built to respond to threats, not diplomatically, violently. The first explosion came at dawn. A recon drone crossed the invisible perimeter, and in less than a second, a turret that hadn't moved in centuries snapped to life and reduced it to dust. No warning. No noise. Just silence. And then death. The Zithran commander on the ground screamed through the comms, demanding backup. But orbital support refused to enter airspace until High Command gave clearance. No one wanted to be the first ship downed by a ghost. And then, once again, the signal repeated, now louder, deeper, and across a wider band. We are awake. This time it didn't stop. The tone became a rhythm, a pulse, a beacon, and that's when they realized it wasn't a message, it was a call. All across the outer systems, derelict satellites blinked back to life. Ancient Earth code, old and cracked but still functional, began relaying data packets at lightning speed. Some ships, long thought to be empty wrecks, powered on for the first time in generations. On a forgotten moon near the Threx belt, a buried hangar opened its steel doors. Inside, rows of cryopods flickered with new power. One by one, faces began to stir inside them. Humans. Still alive. Still armed. Still angry. Lord Kavar turned from the screen, face pale. Prepare a system-wide lockdown. No ships in or out without full scans. Scramble every warfleet in range. Activate the skybreakers and inform the Council that the extinction protocol may need to be reinstated. Mara's voice cracked. You want to restart the extermination program? Kavar nodded, cold. We didn't finish the job last time. We made the mistake of forgetting them. We won't make it twice. But even as he spoke, he knew it was already too late. Because the humans hadn't sent a request. They had sent a promise. And now the Empire could feel the heat building again, deep under its foundations where bones still remembered and shadows still burned. They thought Earth was dead. But Earth never needed a planet to come back, it just needed a reason. And now it had one. For a long time, the empires had believed history could be erased. They believed that silence was the same as death. But they had never truly understood humanity, not in life and certainly not in extinction. Because humans were not just bodies and cities and warships. They were memory. And memory, when buried, does not fade. It ferments, it sharpens, it waits. Trivar 9 was now more than a tremor on a map. It had become the center of a growing storm. The Zitharan Empire called for immediate containment. Military fleets were dispatched. Observation teams were deployed with high-risk orders. No one wanted to be first to set foot near the awakened structure, now labeled Object Alpha 1. But command protocols demanded a closer look, so they sent in the machines, drones, crawlers, sniffers, bots programmed to scan without fear. Most of them never came back. The few that did returned scrambled. Video feeds glitched with static. Sensor data overflowed with corruption. Some devices didn't transmit at all. They simply shut down the moment they crossed the perimeter, like whatever slept inside the structure didn't want to be seen until it was ready. Then came the first real image. One crawler, damaged and barely functioning, rolled back beyond the line and began transmitting. The footage was grainy, barely visible through the frost and static. But it was clear enough. Inside the tower, beneath layers of ancient alloy and pulsing conduits, was a chamber. Not alien, not Zitharan, not Valari, not from any known civilization. Human, black steel, hard angles, floor markings in old Earth standard. The ancient flag, scarred but visible, stamped into the center of the floor. A white eagle, wings curled, talons extended, Earth's last banner. The galaxy hadn't seen that symbol in over 100 years. And yet here it was, staring back at them like an eye that had never closed. The footage caused chaos across Zitharan leadership. Intelligence officers screamed for immediate cleansing operations. Military strategists demanded orbital bombardment. Scientists, strangely quiet until now, whispered to one another about long-rumored projects. Revenant, Nemesis Core, Black Signal. Forbidden words buried in redacted archives. None of it mattered anymore. The past had come back and it was building strength. But while the Empire debated, the tower moved. Not quickly, not with violence, but with purpose. Energy began to flow across its structure in branching lines, cold blue veins beneath dark skin. Lights blinked in sequence. Ports opened and released drones of its own, small spider-like machines that skittered out across the ice and began scanning the terrain. Not attacking, mapping, learning. It was as if the structure had awoken in a foreign land and was trying to understand what had happened while it slept. One scientist watching the footage made a quiet observation. It doesn't know it lost. That single sentence made its way into every classified report that followed. Meanwhile, something else began to change. The signal. It was no longer just the 3 words. We are awake. Now there was something new buried beneath the message. A layer of deeper frequency, almost impossible to detect. But the techs on the listening post caught it. When isolated and filtered, the sound transformed into words. Broken, metallic, old, but still words. Status check. Unit operational. Awaiting command. The machines weren't just waking up, they were waiting. For someone. For orders. For a war that never ended. That's when the ground team found the hatch. It hadn't been there before, or maybe it had, hidden beneath armor plating that now receded like a breath drawn inward. It was round, thick, lined with warning symbols. No one could read them, but the meaning was clear. Danger, and yet someone had to go in. The Empire chose Commander Trask, a veteran of border wars, known for his calm in battle and his cold logic. He was given a squad of elite synthetic troopers and sent down to breach the entrance. His orders were simple: investigate, retrieve data, and destroy if possible. Trask didn't speak much during descent. He didn't have to. He had fought humans before. At the very edge of the galaxy during the collapse, he'd seen what they did when cornered, when desperate, when angry. And now, as the shuttle touched down beside the Black Tower, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. He felt small, The air was sharp, electric. Every step toward the hatch echoed like it was being recorded by the world itself. The tower didn't resist. It didn't attack. It let them in. The squad descended into darkness. Trask's voice came through the comms, steady and clear. Moving inside, interior structure intact. Old Earth construction confirmed. A pause, a breath. There are stasis pods here, thousands. Not all active, some are degraded, more static. We found something else. Control center, looks like it's watching us. Then a long silence. Too long. When the feed came back, it was a single frame of video. A pod, open, empty, human footprints in the dust. And one phrase written in dark red on the glass, smeared with a trembling hand. I never forgot. Then the feed cut. Back in orbit, alarms blared. The tower's surface shimmered as defensive systems came online. Turrets extended from hidden compartments. Shields activated, humming like ancient bees. Zitharan warships shifted formation, preparing for attack. But the tower didn't fire. It waited. And beneath its skin, something massive stirred. A figure walked through the halls. Alone, quiet. His armor bore the old marks of Earth's defense command. His eyes were sunken, cold. And on his wrist a device blinked with new instructions. He looked up at the ceiling, at the humming lines of light running across the metal, and whispered 2 words. Begin upload. The words echoed into the tower's bones. Begin upload. A low hum began in the walls, subtle at first like a thought passing through a dream, then louder, rising through layers of metal and data, vibrating the ground, reaching up into the sky. Across Trivar 9, seismic detectors flared red, temperature spiked, gravity readings twitched. It wasn't a weapon, not yet, but something powerful was pulling itself out of dormancy. In orbit, the Zitharan flagship, Talon's Reach, repositioned its forward batteries and requested fire authorization. Its captain, Vareth Zul, didn't like waiting. He was bred in the Empire's warrior caste, raised to act, not think. But even he hesitated now. That tower wasn't just waking up, it was listening. Do we have eyes on the infiltrator? He barked at his tactical officer. No, sir, came the reply. Commander Trask and his unit stopped transmitting. We believe the structure cut the link. Vareth narrowed his eyes. Or something inside did. Across the command deck, analysts and advisors whispered theories. Some still clung to denial. Maybe this wasn't human tech, maybe it was mimicry or an artificial trap seeded by an ancient species. But others were beginning to admit what they all feared. This wasn't alien. This was a grave remembering what killed it. Inside the tower, the man who had whispered the command stood still as the upload continued. His name was Captain Rhys Solon, Terran designation, Siege-class commander, 3rd Fleet Europa Front. A name that had disappeared from all known records during the Earth collapse, MIA, presumed dead. But he hadn't died. Not exactly. His pod had failed. Not all the way, just enough to keep him frozen in half-sleep, drifting in the in-between. Time passed, but for Rhys it had felt like blinking between thunderclaps. 1 second, the war was ending. The next, he was waking up to a galaxy that had buried his people and walked away. Now he was alone, but not for long. The tower's central core, known in Earth archives as Unit Helix Node Gamma, had recognized his command signature the moment he stepped inside. Biometric match. Neural pattern confirmed. Access granted. It began uploading its memory, military records, battlefield logs, Black Ops reports directly into Rhys's neural interface. And with each second, more pieces came back. The plague hadn't just killed billions, it had driven Earth to madness in its final hours. Desperate scientists had locked away technologies meant to outlast extinction. Doomsday vaults, revenge systems. Protocols like Revenant, Apex Line, and Helix Core, all buried deep in case someone ever tried to erase the species from memory. They tried, and they failed. Now Reese could see it clearly. The tower was only one piece, a node in a network built for one terrifying purpose, to ensure humanity would never vanish quietly. He stumbled slightly as the last files flooded in. His breathing was rough, sharp against the stale air. Old injuries sparked along his spine, his vision blurred with battle memories, friends lost, cities burning, screams over broken comms. But beneath the pain, he felt something else. Clarity. The galaxy thought the war was over. But it never ended. It had only paused. Above, in the frozen orbit of Trivar 9, the Zitharan Council made its choice. Fire authorization granted, came the call through Talon's reach. Captain Vareth Zul didn't wait. All batteries target the tower. Full spread. No warnings. The first barrage dropped from orbit like falling gods. 10 plasma lances, each hot enough to vaporize a cruiser hull. They screamed down through the clouds, glowing like vengeance. They never hit. 50 meters above the tower, the air shimmered, twisted, and a dome of translucent energy unfolded from the structure. It caught the blasts like a hand snatching arrows mid-air. The energy rippled, shimmered, then went still. No damage. The silence afterward was louder than the explosions. Then the tower spoke, not in words, in song. A pulse wave burst from the core, undetectable to most standard sensors. But to older tech, to Terran-built systems long forgotten and scattered across the stars, it was a rally cry, a command. Wake up. On the edge of the Yara drift, a Terran listening post, disguised as asteroid debris, blinked to life. In the shadow of Nebulae K7, a dormant carrier ship, TSS Harbinger, rebooted its systems for the first time in a century. And in a prison mine on the acid world of Drexa 5, a slave worker paused mid-shovel, his eyes widening as the voice in his head, a voice that had gone quiet for all of his life, suddenly whispered, "This is Captain Reese Solon. Earth is not gone. We rise now." He dropped the shovel and ran. Everywhere the dead were waking. Back in the tower, Reese moved to the command deck. His hands hovered over the console, not because he didn't know what to do, but because his body was remembering faster than his mind could keep up. The instinct was coming back, the training, the fury. He activated the uplink. Terran broadcast, priority 1, wideband, no encryption. Static cleared. This is Captain Solon. If you can hear me, you're not alone. We were never gone, they just stopped looking. He took a breath, not because he was tired, but because what came next mattered. They think they buried us, they think they erased us, but we remember. We are the ashes they built their kingdoms on, and we're coming to take it all back. He cut the signal. The tower, now fully activated, began transforming. The ice cracked around it as armored plates reshaped. Cannons slid from hidden compartments. A secondary AI buried beneath layers of corrupted code blinked awake and ran a combat simulation. Threat index high. Response protocol exceed. Above, Talon's reach prepared for a second strike, but this time the tower moved first. A thin beam of light shot straight into the upper atmosphere, silent, unseen, until it sliced through the Zitharan vessel like it was paper. No fire, no explosion. Just a ship torn in half, its front end slipping downward into the clouds, vanishing into the white below. The rest of the fleet pulled back. Cowards, maybe. Or maybe they had seen the truth. The humans hadn't returned in rage. They had returned in memory. And that was worse. In the black sea of space above Trivar 9, the broken remains of the Zitharan warship drifted silently, still glowing with molten cracks, split clean by a weapon no one in the modern galaxy recognized. No empire had technology like that. No species had energy precision that surgical. No one had seen it in over 100 years. But someone had built it. Someone had hidden it. And now someone had fired it again. The remains of Talon's Reach weren't just debris. They were a message, hanging in orbit for every long-range scanner to see. Back in the Empire's capital sector, alarm bells screamed across every level of command. Defense grids shifted into full alert. Planetary governors recalled ships from trade routes. Emergency transmissions lit up comm satellites across 3 systems. Panic had begun to bleed into policy, because they weren't just dealing with a survivor, they were dealing with a resurrection. And the dead didn't care for diplomacy. While the Zitherans tried to spin their loss as a miscalculation deep in the edges of forgotten space, humanity's shadow began to stretch. Rhys Solan's broadcast had rippled far, riding on ancient frequencies, piggybacking through derelict comm relays. Ghosting off old beacons left behind by the Terran military like breadcrumbs through the stars. On the barren world of Eris Gamma, an old bunker door hissed open, steam pouring into the twilight. Inside, 5 cryopods blinked green for the first time in a century. One cracked. Another opened. A hand reached out, pale, shaking, scarred. She emerged slowly, barefoot on the cold steel floor. Sergeant Isla Kern, Orbital Siege Division, presumed dead during the final defense of Mars' orbit. Her first breath was sharp. Her first words were a whisper. Protocol Emberfall. Confirmed. She looked around the dark room. Lights flared to life, recognizing her DNA. Consoles buzzed, weapons racks unsealed. Her armor was waiting, covered in frost but still intact. Gray, marked with Earth's final insignia and the symbol of her division. A hammer striking down on a broken crown. Outside, the skies of Eris Gamma flickered as an ancient satellite adjusted its signal, turning its dish toward deep space. A pulse shot outward, coded, encrypted, carrying one truth. Kern is awake, awaiting orders. And Rhys Solan saw it. Inside the tower on Trivar 9, the console updated. One more red light turned green on the old Terran war map. Then another, and another. Dots appeared across the hollow display, human strongholds reactivating like stars blinking on in a long, dead constellation. Some were military bunkers, others civilian vaults. A few were secret outposts designed to look like nothing at all. Dust-covered hulls, broken comm towers, garbage stations with rot and rust hiding the steel bones beneath. But they were all coming online, all responding to the call. We are awake. Rhys stood over the map, eyes moving from sector to sector. Ela Kern wasn't the only one. On the ghost moon of Valoran, a scrapyard worker named Juno Dane received a signal through her broken helmet radio. She had lived her whole life thinking Earth was a myth. But the code that came through that night, an old Terran military cadence from her father's generation, was real enough to bring her to her knees. In the slums of Arctura 5, a gang of scavengers found themselves surrounded by old machines rising from beneath the street. Turrets, drones, shields. They were triggered by a single phrase carved into a wall they were trying to paint over. This place remembers. And in orbit above the burning clouds of Zalos Prime, a drifting battleship long thought dead, TSS Sentinel, flickered to life. Inside, rows of cryo-soldiers stood waiting. Not all survived. Not all could be revived. But those who did stood tall, eyes glazed with frost, fists clenched at their sides. Their captain, a woman with silver eyes and a scar running down her jaw, walked to the command seat and sat without hesitation. She didn't need a briefing. She had been waiting. Back on Trivar 9, the tower had stabilized. Its defenses remained active, but it made no further attacks. It didn't need to. The Empire had already backed away. Their fleets remained just outside weapons range, scanning, observing, fearing. Inside, Reese walked the inner corridors alone. The tower was quiet now, awake, aware, but calm. Its systems no longer buzzed with startup chaos. They hummed with purpose. Memory was returning to it too. Old logs, old names, old plans. One console showed a classified mission from Earth's final year, a last-ditch initiative launched by Terran High Command called Operation Firebreak. The mission was simple. If Earth falls, the enemy must never forget what they did. Reese stared at it, and he understood. These towers, these ships, these soldiers hidden across the stars. They were all part of that same fire, pieces of a machine built not for survival but for revenge. And now, finally, it was time to move. He opened a line to all active nodes. The map showed more than a dozen now blinking green scattered across 10 sectors. Some were isolated, others already under attack, but they were alive. He spoke with steel in his voice. "This is Solon. We are no longer forgotten. You don't wait anymore. You move, you gather, you strike. Any human who can stand, stand. Any who can fight, fight. The empires won't stop. We don't ask them to." He leaned over the console and typed a final command. "Execute Phase 2. Torchlight." A signal burst from the tower and spread. Across dozens of systems, hidden Terran AI cores activated their directives. Supplies were unsealed, weapons emerged from walls. Old data caches unlocked their contents, flooding networks with information no modern encryption could contain. Plans, maps, weaknesses, and everywhere people moved. Not because they were ordered to, because they remembered. The torchlight signal had no music, no emotion, no fanfare, just data, raw, ancient, and unmistakably human. It surged through the void like wildfire, bouncing from one forgotten satellite to the next, riding on the backs of dormant probes and derelict cargo freighters, piggybacking across jump relays the galaxy had long stopped maintaining. And with every leap, with every flicker of that old Terran code, something else woke up. Not just machines, people. In the Red Drift, a storm-torn region where no formal government dared patrol, a civilian broadcast station crackled to life. The local scavenger population, lawless, bitter, and broken, paused as the static cleared and a voice filled the air. "This is Captain Solon. The fire is lit. If you've got Earth in your blood, now's the time to prove it." It wasn't a plea, it was a call. And across that broken sector, humans who had never even seen Earth dropped their drinks, tightened their boots, and began moving. Word spread faster than any courier. People didn't ask who was in charge, they only asked where to go. On the remote farming world of Avon's Hollow, generations of Terran descendants who'd lived under Zitharan rule, paying taxes for food they grew themselves, heard the signal through a hacked weather tower. When it finished, one of the elders, gray-bearded and blind, stood slowly, reached into the soil and unearthed a sealed chest. Inside was a flag, folded, worn, still perfect. He raised it as high as his shaking hands could carry it, and around him hundreds followed. They didn't know strategy, they didn't have warships, but they had something stronger than training: memory. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the third time in 2 days. Holograms of delegates flickered into the great chamber, some calm, most terrified. A storm of data reports flashed across the main table: planetary uprisings, pirate fleets flying Terran symbols, intercepted communications in extinct dialects, and worst of all, a massive ship signature matching the specs of a long-lost Titan-class cruiser. The council speaker, a three-jawed Valari diplomat named Chancellor Ithish, slammed one fist on the table, voice cracking with unease. This was supposed to be over. A Ural intelligence commander snarled in response. "We trusted the Zitharans to finish the extinction operation. They failed." The Zitharans claimed Earth destroyed itself. They lied. And now the ghosts have teeth. Across the chamber, voices overlapped. Some demanded full military intervention. Others suggested containment, exile, diplomacy. But nothing calmed the room, because they had all seen the footage. The tower on Trivar 9 was just the beginning, and worse, new reports had surfaced. A deep space probe returning from the far reach had captured an image of a massive vessel breaching slipspace. Black, angular, 3 kilometers long. One word had been barely visible on the hull. Revenant. Not a myth, not a rumor. The last known Titan-class warship had returned, and with it, an army was growing. In orbit above the moon of Veltrin, the Revenant moved like a predator returned to its hunting ground. Her hull was scarred from the old war, burn marks and blast pits crisscrossing her armor like battle tattoos. But her power core burned steady, old Terran red, pulsing with a fury that had slept too long. On the bridge, Captain Elias Riker stood at the helm once more, the same man who once defied an empire with a single broadcast. Now he stared at a new map, one marked with beacons. Dozens of them, each one representing a human group that had risen in response to the torchlight signal. Not all were soldiers. Some were farmers, miners, teachers, engineers, smugglers, scavengers. But all were angry. All remembered, and Riker's smile was sharp. They thought we were extinct, he said to no one in particular, but we were just planted too deep. Beside him, the AI Helix responded in its calm, synthetic tone. Incoming message from the warfront. Terran outpost Nexus 12 under siege. Hostile fleet inbound. How many ships? 3 Zithran dreadnoughts, 5 escorts, minimal fighter support. Riker didn't even blink. Send the sledgehammers and tell the crew of the Valor I want full formation. Orders? Same as always, Riker said. Hit hard, leave nothing behind. Back on Trivar 9, Rhys Solon stared at the map as more green lights bloomed. He felt the pieces moving, felt the momentum building, not just in space, but in the souls of the people coming awake. He remembered what it had been like before the fall. Back then, the Terran Alliance had been fractured, arrogant, proud. Too many leaders. Too many blind spots. That's how the plague broke them, through their pride. But now there was no alliance. There was no government. There was only memory and revenge. Solon opened a private line, one only accessible through level Omega encryption. It linked directly to the AI cores hidden deep within the Torchlight network. Authorization, Solon Prime. Begin Phase 3. The AI paused. Phase 3 is marked as Redline status. Confirm? Confirm. The tower's internal system surged. Deep within its foundation, buried weapons awakened. Not plasma cannons, not kinetic railguns. Something older, stranger. A ripple passed through the tower like a shiver in a giant spine, and far away on a world called Dralos 5, a Zithran command center received a strange transmission. A warning, one word spoken in the oldest Terran code known, knock. Seconds later, every system in the command center crashed. The lights went out, and in the dark, a synthetic voice whispered in their ears, "We never forget." Back on Trivar 9, the skies above the tower began to shift. A new ship descended. It wasn't a Titan class, it wasn't even heavily armed, but its markings were Terran. The crew was human, and its cargo bay was full. Crates, weapons, power cores, supplies. More than that, hope. Rhys stepped outside the tower and watched as the ship landed. A ramp lowered, and from the shadows stepped a small group, worn, armored, and ready. The first was Isla Kern. She met his gaze with a nod. "Figured you could use some company." He nodded back. "Just in time, they're starting to run." "Good. she said, checking the rifle slung over her shoulder. Makes them easier to hit. Above them, the Revenant drifted closer to the sector, and Riker's voice echoed across all open frequencies. This is the Terran fleet. You thought we were gone. You thought you could take our worlds, our names, our people. But now we're coming back. He paused. No more warnings, no more waiting. We're lighting the stars on fire. The stars were no longer still. In every corner of the galaxy, once forgotten systems were burning. The void, once calm and cold, now pulsed with the fury of a people who had waited far too long to be heard. The empires, Zitharan, Valari, Ishari, and the rest of the Galactic Council, had miscalculated. They thought they had erased humanity. But you cannot delete fire, you can only feed it. The Revenant, flanked now by 5 resurrected Terran warships, cut through slipspace like a blade through flesh. No encryption, no stealth, no apology. Behind it, a trail of resistance followed, 1,000 ships cobbled together from the bones of old fleets and the steel of rebellion. Freighters converted to gunboats, drones welded into carriers, colony vessels armed with vengeance and jury-rigged missile bays. The galaxy called it chaos. Humanity called it homecoming. In the inner sectors of Council space, preparations were already underway. Defensive fleets gathered near Varelion, the last great stronghold, the Council's crown jewel. 30 worlds within its influence. One massive planetary shield, enough firepower to level moons, and yet they were afraid. Reports came every hour now, world after world falling to human forces, not because of strength, but because of something worse. Belief. Humans were rallying species the Council had long oppressed, minor races, colonies forgotten in the march of empire. All of them remembered the stories of Earth, of the humans who stood their ground when the odds were impossible, of the people who didn't know how to kneel. Now they were following those stories. Now they were rising, too. On Trivar 9, Rhys Solon stood atop the Black Tower, now a fortress of living machinery, its surface pulsing with kinetic charge. Around him, Terran troops were arriving by the dozen, some old, some young, all scarred by survival. Some had trained on Earth itself before its fall. Others had grown up in mines and prisons, scraping by on forgotten moons, but they all wore the mark now. The eagle, the hammer, the flame. Solon stepped forward and raised his voice across the compound. They thought this was about territory, about power, about ships and fleets and command codes. He looked to the stars above, where the Revenant approached like a storm cloud made of steel. But this was always about memory. The troops stood in silence. We are what they tried to erase. We are what they buried under their lies. But memory doesn't die. He clenched a fist. It waits. The final battle began in silence. No warnings, no declarations, no parley. The Terran fleet dropped into orbit over Varelion, and the Revenant took point. Below, the Council's armada moved into formation. Over 300 ships, 3 dreadnoughts, 24 planetary defense stations, anti-ship cannons the size of towers lined the planet's upper atmosphere. But the humans did not stop. The Revenant's engines roared. Its main cannon, the Godstrike, charged with a deep red glow. Its AI, Helix, spoke one final command through every Terran ship. No retreat, no surrender, no forgetting. The first round from the Revenant carved through 2 Council cruisers before they even knew they'd been hit. The second tore a station from orbit, scattering debris across the sky. And then, the swarm followed. Hundreds of Terran vessels, fighters and bombers and modified freighters poured into the formation like locusts. Precision fire lit up the void. Explosions dotted the star field like blooming flowers. The Council returned fire, and it was brutal. Dozens of Terran ships were lost in minutes. The TSS Valor took a railgun round through its flank, spiraling into the lower orbit like a comet. But before it fell, it launched its payload, 5 torpedoes that cracked the Council's central flagship in half. Riker stood on the bridge of the Revenant, watching fire bloom outside his viewport. Sweat rolled down his brow. His eyes were bloodshot, his armor cracked, but he grinned. "This is for Earth," he said. And then he pressed the final trigger. The Godstrike fired again, one final time. The round ripped through the enemy dreadnought, vaporizing its core. The resulting explosion chained across the fleet, igniting fuel tanks, ammunition bays, shield generators. Ships blinked out of existence in waves. Screams filled the Council's channels. Orders turned to static. The sky was falling. And the humans didn't stop. On the surface of Virelion, shock troops landed, not with ceremony, with rage. Solon led the first wave. Kern followed, her hammer unit smashing through barricades like glass. The Council guards held for 20 minutes, then they broke. In the central chamber, the Council delegates huddled, faces pale, robes stained with fear. Ethish, the Valari speaker, screamed for evacuation. But the elevators no longer responded. One final message appeared on their holoscreens. "This is Earth's answer." The end was not clean, and it was fire and ruin and silence. When the battle was done, only 5 Terran ships remained in orbit. The Revenant was torn nearly in half. Its main cannon was gone. Its engines flickered, but it floated, still proud, still watching. Riker sat on the bridge, bleeding from a dozen cuts, watching the flames rise from the planet below. His body was broken. His ship was dying, but his voice was steady. "Send the message," he whispered. Helix obeyed. Across the galaxy, every channel, every screen, every open frequency received the same signal. A man, armor-scarred, eyes like embers, standing in front of a shattered council chamber. "Riker, we are not extinct. We are not forgotten. We are not afraid. You killed our planet. You burned our people. But we are still here, and now you will never forget us again." He stepped aside. Behind him, the Terran flag was hoisted into the smoke, tattered, singed, and still flying. The feed cut to black, and across the galaxy in forgotten corners, people whispered a new truth. The ghosts of Earth had returned, and they had burned their names into the stars. The war was over, but the memory would last forever.